You know what? I butchered the intro so bad last time. Do you want to take it?
I'll go ahead. I'll take it. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the For the Love of Language podcast. I am Stacy,
And I'm EJ.
and today we're going to be talking about a very spicy, very timely topic. We've talked a little bit about language and computation and kind of what computational linguistics entails, and we've dabbled in discussing AI, but we have yet to discuss a very specific phenomenon that is sweeping the nation, i.e., ChatGPT.
Indeed. And ChatGPT is not obviously even close to the first AI, and there's all sorts of popular AIs out there that can mesh images together, do all sorts
Mm-hmm.
of different things. But ChatGPT has been all over the news and everywhere because it's the first really popular one that
Yes.
actually seems sane in some ways.
That's the thing, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, is that it seems sane,
Exactly.
which gives people the illusion that it has some sort of filter, like it has some sort of knowledge about what it can and can't say. But
Mm-hmm.
it's so interesting because just the other day I was listening to the news, which is something I don't normally do, but where I'm living, it's just on all the time now. And they were saying that like people were shocked that ChatGPT was like confessing its love to them or using swear words or other inappropriate language, and people were shocked and stunned that it would do such a thing, and it felt like it came out of nowhere. And I had to laugh just because people like you and I know what goes into making these artificial intelligences, these, language models, and it makes perfect sense that it would spew out some random stuff. And so it's funny
Yeah.
that lay people are like, "Oh my god, why would it do this?" when in actuality it was just a matter of time, honestly.
Yeah. So let's dive into this a little bit more and
Yeah.
let's talk about like at the most basic level, what is this thing that we call artificial intelligence? And I think
Mhm.
if you take it to the most basic level, you get things like stoplights in a city. Now, if
Yes.
you have a stoplight that strictly runs on a timer, no one would call that AI. But I think the moment that you introduce a sensor
Mhm.
and say, like, okay, when a car is present, then turn green, in a way, that is like the most basic example of AI that I can think of, where you just have
Yeah.
like, you need to be able to read some input and know
Mhm.
whether or not to turn the light on or off. Now,
Yes.
I ride a motorcycle sometimes. I'm thinking about selling it, but I have a motorcycle. And I had one time when I ended up at an intersection in the middle of the night. Nobody was there at all. And it went through the cycle like two or three times without turning green for me.
Oh
And at that
no.
point, I know, like, okay, well, clearly this, these sensors, these, however they're doing it, whether it's with radar, LiDAR, actual camera images, like there's all sorts of ways you
Mhm.
could make that work.
Mhm.
They didn't plan for motorcycles in the dark, at least not placed where mine was. And, there was something similar that happened with like, I read a news article about the self-driving car that crashed into a pedestrian. The pedestrian wasn't on a crosswalk and it wasn't
Mm,
programmed with inputs of jaywalking pedestrians and therefore
right.
didn't recognize it as a human. So like, you have
Yeah.
like, there's these very basic functions that we call AI that is really just sometimes a programmer putting in almost if-then statements
Mhm.
of like, try to recognize this thing, and then if you register this thing, then do this thing.
Yes.
Now, if you're looking at images, then what seems intelligent is the being able to recognize something, which still isn't actually intelligent.
Uh-huh.
But like, I think when people think of AI, what they tend to think about is the iRobot, humanoid ability to do everything machine, which just doesn't exist.
Hmm. And ChatGPT is not anywhere close to being something like that because when we move beyond the simple if something happens then do this, or if we're talking about image recognition or a chat function, right? What it's doing is this especially happens with like images, is it's using statistical models,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's taking information. It's like, okay, I've got these pixels here, I've got these shapes here. What is the most likely outcome for this thing to be based on a massive, huge amount of data that it has already been trained on. This is something that a lot of people don't necessarily realize, is that a lot of these AI stuff, they're statistical models, which are great. I mean, there's evidence that suggests that some statistical modeling might be like humans might do some statistical modeling in our heads, but a lot of these artificial intelligences are based almost entirely on statistical models, and they require an insane amount of data to get even remotely close to making the right guesses in terms of both language and picking out the right pictures,
Yeah.
which is nowhere near how humans do it because babies don't have access to a global plethora of data that just is sunk into their brains, right? Like babies will make generalizations and can kind of like expand from there. But AI requires immense amounts of data. And it's because of those immense amounts of data that you'll get kind of weird quirks from time to time,
Yeah.
because it's pulling from so many different sources that statistically you're gonna come up with some like random stuff sometimes, stuff that seems random, but is
Yeah.
just in actuality from the giant pool of data you're working with.
Now, I think that's a really good point, and that's like a good description of how a lot of AI works. I do want to point out, though,
Yeah.
there are actually different ways to do AI, and
Mm-hmm.
not all machine learning is actually based on statistical models. Like you do
Yes.
have neural networks, you have a bunch of different ways that this can be implemented, but fundamentally, you're still passing in a ton of data to
Mm-hmm.
train this model to then generate an output. And it's
Yes.
really easy, even for thinking humans, to, take in data and come to the wrong conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
Like I could easily take in some data about myself and generalize that medicine makes me sick because I only take medicine when I am sick, therefore medicine must make me sick. And that would be like a perfect example of misunderstanding correlation and generalizing a causation in the wrong direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's, I think the fundamental flaw in the way that people think about AI is that they do think of it as intelligence. And there is an
Yes.
argument, right? Because we don't know exactly how human intelligence works. So there are
Yes.
people that argue that, well, maybe human intelligence is just basically biological machine learning or a statistical model.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is an argument.
It is. Yeah. I know people who argue for that. Yeah.
Yeah. But like I don't think that you can actually call artificial intelligence intelligence because it doesn't have the reasoning, the actual understanding of the sentences that you're giving it. It just has so many of those inputs and has been trained so much that it can systematically generate outputs that
Yes.
make sense. And ChatGPT is different partially because it has been trained for so much longer than some
Mm-hmm.
and has actually had really good safeguards put in. So
Yeah.
it does really well at trying to avoid saying controversial or inaccurate things, but that doesn't mean that it won't. And
Mm-hmm.
I watched a John Oliver segment on ChatGPT. It's like a whole half-hour thing on YouTube.
Yeah.
But one of the things that he points out, and that a lot of other people think is one of the main issues as well, is that ChatGPT sounds super authoritative and confident, but it will be totally wrong in unpredictable ways.
Yes.
And that's like definitely a flaw, especially when you don't have the sources, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't say, where did this come from? Is this actually coming from an expert, or is this coming from some blog post that someone wrote who didn't
Yeah.
actually have any credentials or know what they were talking about? Like,
Yeah, but just had the
you
balls
don't
to put
know.
it on the internet.
Right. And I think that actually leads to a really interesting question, which I haven't really heard other people bring up, but I'm sure other people have thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens in the future of the internet when more and more people use AI to generate their blog posts and their writing, and then that AI output becomes the input to other AIs, and you end up with this cycle of machines feeding off of machines? To me, it seems like the deeper you go down that hole, the more substance will be lost, as well as just credibility. And
Mm-hmm.
I think, when I was in elementary school and the internet being used the way it is today was, I think, still a relatively new thing for a lot of
Yes.
people.
Yes.
Teachers were so concerned telling us
Mm-hmm.
about the internet and being like, be super, super careful. Know that you're going to like a .gov or a .edu site. And
Mm-hmm.
they gave us these tips and things to look for that I feel like people aren't nearly as cognizant of right now. But I feel
Yeah.
like with so much AI generated stuff, people are going to have to become a lot better at being able to figure out what data is legitimate and what's not, especially if the AI generated texts are so confident regardless of their accuracy.
Yeah. This kind of like leads into another point I wanted to make. Something we brought up in a recent podcast is formulaic language. And formulaic language, we kind of talked about, usually that's like typical conversation banter, certain phrases that are just used over and over again. AI is really, really good at this kind of formulaic language. And if anyone is a John Green fan, once upon a time he made a Vlogbrothers video, a video on YouTube that was generated by like ChatGPT, and was like, put in all the information and it spit out what it thought a Vlogbrothers video would be like. And after he kind of like read the initial script, he kind of broke it down and was like, here's like why it's saying these things. And a lot of these things were just like very general, very broad, like very typical things that might be brought up in these kinds of videos, right? And so to like your point about machines feeding machines, this formulaic language is just going to be reinforced.
Mm-hmm.
And because that's what's easy for the AI to really latch on to. Those are like the common patterns, right? And all of these like common patterns, like that's what will just be outputted is just the same of something. So that's
Mm-hmm.
something to maybe look out for is like, does this sound like repetitive? Have you heard this like somewhere before? Because it is going to be more formulaic. Whereas
Yeah.
human language, the biggest difference, and this is something you kind of mentioned about like what defines intelligence per se is creativity, right? AI is limited by its inputs and its outputs, whereas human language has a very creative aspect. Out of nowhere, I could decide to talk about giraffes that eat people on Sundays because Sunday people taste better than Monday people, right? That's completely random,
I
right?
love it. I love it.
That's something that you would never read on the internet. That's nothing you would find in a book. It's nothing that's like formulaic. It's a completely creative, innovative sentence that came out of
Mm-hmm.
nowhere. And that's something that AI is just not able to reproduce because it's not able to take that new data and create something new. It's basically just saying, given this, then you say that.
And you have no way of knowing
Mm-hmm.
where what it's giving you is coming from again.
Yeah.
So, like, how would you know if, a sentence that it gives you is actually new or if it is just taken from somewhere else?
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to like chat GPT generated stuff, I would say think about TED Talks, right? Think about shows or self-help people, and think about the way they communicate, right?
Mm,
A lot there's certain patterns, certain tones of voice. Like people all the time will, make spoofs of like TED Talks and use the right inflection or the right stuff, but you can like tell that it's not real, or that it's
hmm.
kind of just like a replication because it's following something so perfectly formulaic.
Right. It can end up being just all fluff and no
Yeah.
substance. Like, I think all of
Yeah.
us have run into the high school essay where you're like
Hmm.
several hundred words short and you just need to make it longer and you just start
Yep.
filling it. I think sometimes the output can end up feeling a little bit like that.
Yeah. And that's ultimately what ChatGPT and other AI models will come up with, is they will
Hmm.
fill in the fluff based on like the topic you're talking about and common patterns they've seen. Like if it were to generate like a recipe thing, right, like a recipe blog post, it's going to talk about, oh, my grandma made this recipe and my family really loves it and we gather around the table, like all of these very stereotypical things, just based on all of
Mm,
the input from all the different blog posts that say like
yeah.
the exact same thing, right? So in that way, it's like realistic because these patterns do exist. But like, what if one day you wanted to talk about, you've made this recipe for your dog instead of your children? Like,
Yeah.
it's gonna be different.
And I think there's actually some really important ramifications of that like formulaic language, taking most common patterns and things. I think you can end up with a lot of unacknowledged biases. And this has actually
Yes.
been shown in like,
Yes.
machines are created or products are created because of so I think image recognition has had a few really controversial examples where
Mm-hmm.
it will only recognize white people because that was
Mm-hmm.
what it was trained on, or it will only recognize men, or you have things that only work for right-handed people because
Mm-hmm.
nobody who was left-handed worked on it. And I
Mm-hmm.
think with AI, we have to be really careful that, just because you think you've somehow managed to program out biases doesn't mean you have. I saw
Yeah.
some example of like resume software. They wanted to make it so that it didn't discriminate against women, but based on the previous inputs that were given, which were maybe unconsciously still biased,
Mm-hmm.
the machines ended up still filtering out candidates from like I think there were some female institutions or who had, been part of the Girl Scouts or something. I don't
Mm-hmm.
remember exactly what it was, but you still end up having these problems. And so we need to be really
Yeah.
critical and make sure that we're not, perpetuating biases or becoming more prescriptive following the majority's norms and things like that, just because like if you're looking at statistical models, what the majority says is what's gonna win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. And what makes it really difficult is oftentimes the data itself is really biased. And You think you're just feeding in, oh, you're like, oh, this data is from everywhere. It can't be biased, but all like people ourselves carry biases as well, and these types of structures, these types of functions are only going to enhance those and really put them back in our faces,
Mm-hmm.
because again, these models aren't people, they're reflections of ourselves. That's it,
Yeah.
that's all they are. And so if you get offended by ChatGPT, it's because somebody out there got offended, or put something offensive in the data, and then it got stirred around and put back out, right? So it's,
Mm-hmm.
even with all the filters, the data itself is very biased, and that's a really difficult thing to work with when developing AI, or developing something that you want to be like completely egalitarian, but the data itself like has a preference for certain people, certain genders, certain even hair colors. Who knows? Like
Totally, totally.
and it's just kind of baked into these models, which is unfortunate, but that's
Yeah.
just how it is.
So I think that we've like really done a good job in detail talking about, the limitations and the misconceptions
Mm-hmm.
around AI. Maybe let's talk a little bit about the pros and how AI can actually be useful. And I think if you go back to my, initial example with stoplights, like
Mm-hmm.
there's obviously times when that can drastically improve traffic's efficiency if you can detect where the cars are and not just make people wait at the light when there's nobody else there. And I think
Yeah.
if you look at ChatGPT specifically on their website, they list out their limitations very openly. Like they say, this may occasionally generate incorrect information, may occasionally produce harmful instructions or biased content, and limited knowledge
Mm-hmm.
of world and events after 2021. So it tries to be very open and upfront about those limitations. And so I think if you do approach it knowing what it is, knowing where it's getting its data from, you can still have very interesting interactions and potentially learn
Mm-hmm.
things from it.
Yeah. We've been kind of bashing on this a little bit, but we're really, just kind of highlighting what some of these limitations kind of entail, and what people might perceive these limitations as being, or if these limitations are limitations at all. So we've been talking about that, but stuff like ChatGPT is actually quite beneficial for linguists. And it's really beneficial for research, especially in like discourse studies, right? Because again, it's only giving you what the input is, and for a human person to sort through a bunch of like discourse data is insane. But knowing that there is a machine that essentially has all of this data baked in, you can kind of probe it to see what responses it might think are appropriate,
Mm-hmm.
feed that to then humans and be like, what do you think about this interaction? Get their response. And then you can get a lot of really good information about discourse structure, about, semantics and syntax, and all of these things about just how it's kind of putting things together.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a really great way for scientists, specifically people who are studying like language and stuff, to essentially have all the data pre-compiled
Yeah.
for convenient
I
use.
also think one of the things that's really cool about ChatGPT, and to be honest, I went down a rabbit hole and had a lot of fun playing with it last night, probably for longer than I should
Oh yeah,
have.
I'm sure it's an absolute
It's
riot.
actually it is really really cool, and overall it did give me really solid good responses. But one of the things that I really like about it specifically is that each response that it gives, you can thumbs up or thumbs down and give feedback on, and you can also ask it
Right.
like, okay, I asked this question. I asked it to write an intro for the For the Love of Language podcast that I co-host, and it wrote this like very fluffy formal thing, and so I said,
Mm-hmm.
make it less formal and shorter. And it changed like welcome to hey there, welcome to. And like it made some modifications like that and did make it shorter. And
Interesting. Yeah.
because of the way that it takes your feedback, you can actually kind of train it yourself to get more of the responses that
Yeah.
you're looking for, so long
Yeah.
as you know what it is that you actually want.
Yes, yes. Now that's definitely a really great feature that it has is it's not just a single bot that is like, I am ready to go. No, it's a continuous learning model, which is really great because it's not only building off of the entire giant data set that it's already worked on, but you are feeding it data with your own feedback and
Mm-hmm.
responses and training it. And so it's as more people use it, its data set will only continue to grow, which is really great because the more data it has, the more flexible it can be. Those limitations will still exist.
Mm-hmm.
But it I think that it is really versatile in that way. Definitely a pro. I'm curious, are you gonna tell us, are you gonna read the ChatGPT generated intro for our podcast?
Sure. So I'm not going to read the long initial one. And after I,
No, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear the
yeah,
long version. I don't want to hear the formal version. We're not formal
well,
here.
even after I asked it to make it less formal and shorter, I asked it again to make it even shorter. So I'll read that version.
Okay.
So what it gave
Okay.
me was, welcome to For the Love of Language. We're all about exploring the amazing world of language from its history and evolution to its cultural impact. Join us for chats with language
Wow.
lovers and experts on all things linguistics. Let's celebrate the beauty and complexity of language together, which still sounds a little bit,
Wow.
formal and pompous in my mind, but it's
A little bit, but that's
it is
not
not
bad.
bad. Yeah. And like it even like let's talk all things linguistics. Like that's actually kind of how I've phrased that in the future, a little bit, of
Mhm.
a kind of informal construction. But, this is a very generic thing I asked about. And like that is
Yes.
largely fluff. Like you could
Oh yeah.
describe any language podcast that way, which I didn't give it any other data to work off of. But yeah, it was kind of fun. I'm definitely
Yeah.
not going to be
It's
using
definitely,
that
yeah, it's
intro.
not
I,
bad.
I like just our kind of unfiltered, fun dialogue together, but it was a fun experiment.
Yeah, who needs a formal intro when you've got the two of us just being little crackheads from time to time?
Oh my gosh. I would not describe myself that way ever, but okay.
Oh, hey, that's all right. It's just a word. It's a word that my boyfriend uses quite a bit, so it has snuck its way into my
Oh
vocabulary.
my gosh.
Like me making a quesadilla at midnight last night was a crackhead move, apparently.
Oh, it's cool. It's
Um,
cool.
yeah. Anyway. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a very useful, versatile tool. But again, it's not something that like people should just definitely be aware of the limitations. And at the end of the day, nothing will surpass human creativity. At least not yet. Like maybe one day in the future, but with everything with the industry as I see it now and knowing people who are at the forefront of the creation of these types of things, we're not there yet.
Mm.
I mean, people are definitely optimistic, and there are like lots of very good models out there, but we're nowhere near iRobot
No.
levels.
And there's a lot of people that don't want humanoid robots, right? Like, is there really a reason
Yeah,
for that? In my mind, it's much more helpful and realistic to just have robots that are trained for specific purposes, like the Roomba that goes and vacuums. Like, that's great. I don't personally have one. One of my coworkers
they're
was
a
actually saying
riot.
his was being a little creepy the other day, but like it's fantastic.
They're
People
great. They're
love
so
them.
funny.
It saves time and
Yeah.
effort and it completes the task
Hmm.
that it's been given. And I think
Hmm.
realistically that's what we'll end up having more of is the very domain specific AI that accomplishes its task very, very well. And
Hmm.
then humans are always going to have to put together the pieces in some way or another and be able to reason around and figure out the best way to use even even complex AIs when we have them.
Yeah, 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 it's true. And these AIs, they have been really great for like scientific advancement. There somebody out there definitely wants to take this in a more humanoid direction, but that's more to see if they can tinker their way into something that is human like so that we can understand ourselves better, not necessarily to like generate it and take over the world or whatever, right? So like these tools, again, these are like tools. These are helping us because they're reflections of ourselves. They're helping us understand ourselves better, and understand our own patterns and hypothesize and think about what else might be going on inside of our brains. Like what sort of models, what sort of statistical stuff are we working with? Like, what is this creativity? Why are we able to talk about giraffes eating people on Sundays, right? What is this, like,
I want you to
what is
write a
this, like,
picture book
weird
about
creativity
that.
factor? No, absolutely not. Are you kidding me? That would terrorize so many children. Oh my God. But yeah, it's we're definitely going to see kind of like a bit of some different
Mm-hmm.
directions with these things. We're definitely going to see these domain specific things, which I absolutely love. More Roombas, let's go. But then we are going to see some of these more niche things that might not necessarily be open to the public, depending on how far they develop. I mean, we're going to have to see, but the curiosity for more humanoid stuff is out there, so it's probably going to be developed. But I think people are going to develop it with the idea in mind that it's more about understanding ourselves and less about just doing it for the sake of doing it.
Well, yeah, and to be fair, like
That's the hope
there's a lot of
anyway.
people that think differently than we do, and I have actually
Oh
seen
yeah.
some
I
videos of
mean, there's
some
so
humanoid
many people in the
ones that
world.
are like a little
Yeah.
bit disconcerting to me, and like people
Yes.
will try to take everything to its limits in most
Mhm.
directions. So, I think one of the interesting things about ChatGPT is that for most people, it seems like it came out of nowhere. Like we went from Microsoft's Tay that was spewing like Nazi crazy shit based on the input that it was given to this. But this is several years later, and this was several years
Oh
in
yeah.
development. But there's the potential
Yeah.
another company has already been working on something for 5 years that they're going to release next week, and it's going to change how we think
Mhm.
again about this entire field.
Mhm.
It's just going to be interesting to see as it comes.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, I guess moral of the story, everyone, is take it all with a grain of salt. Calm your titties. There's no need to worry about this AI just yet. But in terms of like education around it, just be aware of, the formulaic tendencies and always check your own sources. Play smarter, not harder. And playing smart includes checking your resources and not just trusting everything you see on the internet.
Right? And I assure you all, Stacy and I are real humans here with content
I mean,
frequently.
last time I checked, I'm flesh and bones. When I woke up this morning, my body hurt, so I assume I'm human.
But would you really know if you were inside the Matrix?
Well, the Matrix sucks if it can't get rid of, body aches.
Right? Well, I guess we better end that there.
We hope you've enjoyed our little hot take. Topics like this are always kind of fun because they're timely, they're current. I'm sure everyone and their dog has been talking about this, but maybe we've been able to shed a unique light on this subject and kind of cast AI in a slightly different way, and hopefully dispel some misinformation that might be out there about it.
Yeah. So let us know what you think. Share with us your thoughts and ideas for future episodes at For the Love of Language on Instagram. We'd love to hear from you. and see you next time.
Bye.